Hello and welcome to this edition of UFO Report. We will focus on the legendary UFO searchlight case of Norwood, Ohio, a series of sightings that took place near Cincinnati in 1949. Recent investigative focus has brought to light more details about the Norwood case, some of which I recently discussed at the June 2004 Tri-State Mutual UFO Network Conference held in Covington, Kentucky.
Those are invaders.
Those are the
Natural invaders.
upsetting, frustrating objects. We just survived the cicada wave of 04. So I think we're all glad that's behind us now. I did not enjoy the smell of the cicadas. My dogs enjoyed the cicadas. And they fought over the cicadas there at the very end. Okay, I'd like to touch base on real quick here. I've talked about the last time we had a meeting here. I think I touched on Jackie Gleason and the story about Jackie Gleason's involvement with UFOs. There was a story that surfaced some time back that pertained to Jackie Gleason's interest in the subject of unidentified flying objects. He was a good friend of Richard Nixon, and Jackie Gleason apparently was so fascinated with the subject that he even had his home built to in the shape of a flying saucer. He called his home the Mothership, and this is his Florida home. We've got a picture of it here. Allegedly, according to the way the story goes in UFO folklore, Jackie Gleason was shown alien bodies by President Nixon at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. What we have done in the last year, we've made progress on in this investigation. We've actually tracked down the ex-wife of Jackie Gleason, Beverly McKittrick. I interviewed her by telephone last July, and she did confirm the story for us, and we were very surprised to make contact with her, because I'd tried for maybe 3 or 4 years to get a hold of this woman. She's hard to get a hold of. She wasn't listed, but we kind of do you have a question, sir?
Yes. Was there a reported UFO crash? Because the bodies have to come from somewhere close by within a recent time frame. Well, I don't know. I certainly don't have the answer to that.
An interesting line of investigation. Yeah, there's the UFO subject is full of reported UFO crashes, so we don't, our focus is not necessarily on what crash that was. Our focus was on talking to his ex-wife and getting the story about this. So that's really our development. Is getting in touch with her. As Donnie was talking on briefly there, we've had a lot of activity here in the last year. 2003 was a wild year for sightings and crop circles. Everybody knows about that. We try to keep track of all this stuff. We post a lot of news and information on the internet. If you are online, go to the website. There's the address. I'm sure a lot of you have already checked it out. The biggest news lately is the Mexican situation. The situation involved a military surveillance plane that was using infrared imaging to look for drug smugglers, and they picked up these objects that were also tracked on radar. And this was March 5th. The objects surrounded the Mexican surveillance plane, and the Mexican Air Force acknowledged this. It was completely unprecedented for a governmental Air Force agency to acknowledge UFOs.
What did they theorize it was?
They haven't theorized anything about it. It's simply something they just said is unidentified. So what I'm going to talk about here real quickly, and I'm going to try to go through this as fast as I can because we've got a lot of stuff on the agenda here today. The Norwood incident from 1949. What is the Norwood incident? That is 10 visual sightings of a UFO from August of 49 to March of 1950 that took place in the grounds of the St. Peter and Paul Church in Norwood. This is a image of Norwood in 1949. The first event took place on August 19th, and this was the Jitney Carnival of 1949. At the time, there were literally thousands of witnesses to this event. It was seen by it was picked up by a searchlight that was used to promote the church festival. This is a image of the church in 1949. Today it's called Holy Trinity. I don't know if anybody in here is familiar with Norwood or not. This is the searchlight that was used. It was actually operated by Army Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and he was hired by the church pastor, Reverend Gregory Miller, to operate the searchlight. He kept detailed logs of each sighting. And the August 19th event was the first situation that triggered his interest. And as I said, it was something that was literally seen by thousands. It wasn't simply something that took place at the festival. This was a situation that was witnessed all across Cincinnati and a large part of southern Ohio. Here's one article from the Cincinnati Times-Star. Another article from the Cincinnati Post, strange lights reported in sky. One thing about this was the various terms used to describe the object of the August 19th event. They described it as strange lights, stationary bodies of white light, an object resembling a weather sealing balloon that did not move despite wind speed, comets poised over city. I thought this was some comical reportage that was given in the Cincinnati Enquirer. All three papers covered this event locally, so it was something that was picked up in the media at the time. Reverend Gregory Miller, the church pastor, entered into an agreement with the Cincinnati Post managing editor Robert Lynn to report this to intelligence officials at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. So they were impressed by this. I don't think this is simply a case of searchlights bouncing off of clouds that had people concerned. They were saying there was a solid physical object there. Berger reported in his logs that he picked up a space platform. So I thought that was very curious, and what would intrigue someone to write that, what exactly he saw is really incredible. But the description we have of what happened on August 19th, it was a massive object. It was an outstanding sighting that took place locally here in Cincinnati. The second event happened on September 11th of 1949. This also happened at another church festival locally in Madeira, Ohio. Donald R. Berger took his large military-grade searchlight to that church festival, and there he picked up the UFO. I also understand recently we've located newspaper articles in the Coshocton Tribune of Coshocton, Ohio, and also the Lima, Ohio newspaper carried articles about the sighting from September 11th. Again, the next event, September 17th, Donald R. Berger, the searchlight operator, he finds a UFO, he writes, while testing his searchlight at a Army surplus depot in Milford, Ohio. This event takes place around dusk. Object is not self-luminous, and which means that it was not visible unless he was able to project the searchlight directly on it. This is the big event, October 23rd of 1949. A gathering of 50 people, curiously, in the rear parking lot of the St. Peter and Paul Church in Norwood. They observed the strange object between 7:15 and 10:45 p.m. I got this article from the Cincinnati Post the following day. The October 23rd event was very significant. It happened on in the rear parking lot of the church. Present were notable people: Reverend Cletus Miller, the brother of Gregory Miller, who was also present. Berger, of course, running the searchlight. Norwood Police Officer Leo Davidson and scientist William Winkler of Winkler Color Services was present. Also was Cincinnati Post reporter Leo Hurdle and managing editor Robert Lynn. Here was very curious about the October 23rd affair. An unidentified astronomer was reported in this newspaper article as being questioned by the military regarding his observation of the object of October 23rd. This object was said to discharge numerous smaller objects that were triangular shaped. The Reverend Cletus Miller described them as resembling something like the apex of Indian arrowheads. This was a dramatic sighting. It was a massive object. There were a very curious series of flashes that preceded each projection of smaller objects from the main object. Reportedly, fighter planes were scrambled but could not reach the altitude of the UFO. And this was reported by Leonard Stringfield, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I know Pete Hardinger was really interested in some of what Leonard Stringfield reported about that, and we'll talk about that here. The object of October 23rd was also photographed, and it was filmed by Norwood Police Department. This is a photograph of the Norwood object. I wish we had better clarity here on the screen, but we're going to get some enlargements here. It looks like some kind of it doesn't look like what you would expect a conventional image of a flying saucer to look like. Pete, I think in that book you've got there, you've got some images that are identical to this. And what we're going to do here in a little bit, we're going to take these images and we're going to analyze them. But also present in Norwood at the time of the event was Paul Cook. He's a local resident. He was 6 years old at the time of the incident. He said to turn the searchlight off by military people that drove onto the church lot in a Jeep. Also, in researching some of this, I went to the library and I pulled this article from the following morning's newspaper. Mock battle fought high over Cincinnati by 2 Air National Guard groups. I thought that was curious, given that this dramatic event had taken place from the day before. Also on the next day, October 24th, Berger activates his searchlight, and boom, immediately upon turning the light on, the object is visible in the exact same place it was the night before. This is not only recorded in Berger's logs, but we also had obtained this statement from a person that we'll talk about later. Also present on October 24th was Air Technical Intelligence Agent Lou Gerhardt, as per the Berger logs. On November the 19th, again, another incident happened. Operating searchlight again on the Norwood grounds. For whatever reason, we do not know right now. Berger spots the object at 7:15 p.m. Many witnesses were present. December 20th. This is a very significant occurrence taking place on the church grounds. From 8:15 p.m. to 10 o'clock at night, the UFO is visible in the searchlight beam. This is something to watch now. Present are UC physicist Dr. Dare A. Wells and noted astronomer Professor Paul Herget. Now, we know from the October 23rd incident there was an astronomer present. We don't know his name. He was an unnamed person, but it's possible, given that Herget was listed as being there on the 20th, this could be him. This is the mayor of Norwood at the time, Ed Tepe. He had told several years after the incident that Herget and Wells worked closely with 2 Air Force Office of Special Investigation agents to observe the UFO, measuring its size and distance. It was said to be 10,000 feet in diameter at an estimated elevation of 10 miles up. Tepe made his comments to Leonard Stringfield in 1954. This is Dr. D.A. Wells. He was quoted later as saying, "In my opinion, it's an optical illusion." This is astronomer Professor Paul Herget, and he said also in the same article, it may be a fake. Or he said it's not a fake. It may be caused by the illumination of gas in the atmosphere. Herget collected data on minor planets. He went on to work in the U.S. space program. And he was critical of UFO reports, and he dismissed the topic altogether. Stringfield interviewed Herget in 1956, and the first thing Herget said to Stringfield when he walked in the room, "Do you have a security clearance?" And Herget said no. Stringfield said, "No, I do. My research is strictly civilian." And Herget said, "I take a dim view on the subject. There's absolutely nothing to it." Herget, like I say, he was very critical of UFOs. I've got some interesting quotes of by Herget on the subject. The sightings continued in Norwood, happening on January 11th, March 9th, and again on March 10th of 1950. Present during each occurrence were notable high-caliber witnesses, police officers, military observers, scientists, clergy. And the event, again, made news on the April 6, 1950. It made the front page of the Cincinnati Post, and there you see the headline article. So this is not something that was low key. This was saturating the news media back in 1949. But my question is, what happened to Donald R. Berger after the April 6, 1950 news article? Boom, he's off the scene. We've lost track of him. I've even talked to private detectives and a lot of researchers to try to locate this person. No luck so far. To find out what happened to him, to talk to his family, what his family say that this person knew. Okay, so from here now, what I want to try to do real quickly before I wrap this up is just to go through the timeline of events that happened after Norwood. There's no movement on the case. For several years, the case has lost its identity. Around this time frame, local researcher Leonard Stringfield began taking an interest in UFOs. And in 1952, he appeared on Channel 9 WCPO with the Reverend Gregory Miller. And that's where he met Miller. And he also obtained a copy of the Berger logs. And he saw the Norwood film at the studio. They rolled the film through a projector and watched it. 1954, Stringfield interviews the Norwood mayor, Ed Tepe. And he publishes his first edition of the Criffo Orbit newsletter. In July of 54, Stringfield makes his first reference to the Norwood case in his newsletter, and it lists anonymously Reverend Miller as a clergyman who is well known in Cincinnati and who owns a reel of authentic film showing a hovering UFO. And by the time of the August 6th newsletter, he finally makes his first detailed reference to the Norwood incident, and he publishes the Berger logs at that time. No more movement on the Norwood story till 56. Stringfield makes another reference to the Norwood case. Here's a very interesting quote from Stringfield's newsletter. Giant satellites approximating 10,000 feet in diameter, such as the one that hovered over Cincinnati in 49 and 50, could be used for long periods and be wholly independent. Like the parent craft over Cincinnati, each could carry its brood of smaller devices. 1957, Max B. Miller publishes a book and makes reference to the Norwood case. Also in 57, the book Saucer Post 30 Blue. Stringfield publishes that book and he makes reference to Norwood. In June of 57, Norwood mayor is killed in an automobile accident. In 1959, January, Reverend Gregory Miller, he dies of an illness. In 62, Cletus Miller is the subject of a bizarre extortion plot. I don't think any of this is related to Norwood, but I'm just tracking the participants. Cletus Miller, it's important to track his activity because the possessions of Miller, Gregory Miller, were left to his family. Cletus Miller may have been the recipient of the movie film of the Norwood object. There were reports, additionally, that the Norwood object was seen at other festivals happening in the 60s. I've talked to two people about this. I don't know about these reports. I'm a little dubious of them. Perhaps people are equating things to the 1949 events, but I don't know. In 76, Cletus Miller dies. His belongings are left to his nephew, Dominic Citrullo. I contacted Dominic Citrullo about 2 years ago. He lives in Florida now. He told me he believes all of this material was confiscated by the government. Very curious. In 77, Leonard Stringfield publishes his book, Situation Red, the UFO Siege, and again makes reference to Norwood. Professor Paul Herget, he dies in 1981. In 1985, the Norwood photos are reportedly shown at a Norwood Kiwanis Club meeting by several police officers who entered the meeting and passed the photos around from a manila envelope to the people attending the meeting. In 93, there is an attempt made to locate the Norwood UFOs at the police department. Reportedly, a file is found at the department marked UFO, but there's nothing in the file. In 94, Leonard Stringfield dies. His files and case data are retained by the immediate family. We don't know if there are any additional details about the Norwood object or negatives of the photos in his files. This is the Holy Trinity Church. It's now called Holy Trinity. At the time it was St. Peter and Paul. If anybody in here is aware of this, they have been holding visionary meetings, and I say visionary, people who look for Mother Mary. They hold these meetings and they draw crowds of thousands of people. And it just so happens to be at the very same location of the Norwood searchlight incident. So, for what that's worth. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I've been to those.
Uh-huh.
I've been to the, what you call it, sightings?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, the light, it's like lightning.
Uh-huh.
And Mary said she's going to come with her lights, and all this light just keeps coming and coming and coming. I think the whole,
Yes.
it's in the Norwood Catholic Center right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something else. I got to get a picture of it.
Well, they draw thousands of people. It's really remarkable. And right at the stroke of midnight, everybody aims their camera at the church building and they flash their light bulbs.
Yeah, but
And that's.
do you think it's the flash?
Well, I've videotaped it one time, and so the people of faith are looking at that and they're seeing various things.
But then that was stopped.
Uh-huh. And most of the gatherings are really undertaken because of a few anonymous people locally who claim Mother Mary sightings and encounters. In November of 1996, the Norwood story was the focus of a television program produced by Bob Leibold of Natural Light Productions. We have Bob here behind the camera. Appreciate him showing up. We devoted a full hour to the discussion of the Norwood story. In 1999, the book CE5 by Richard Haynes is published, and it also talks about Norwood. CE5 stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, in which reportedly a UFO will respond to human-initiated contact. And the working theory is the Norwood story is a case in which the searchlight used by the searchlight operator was interacting with this UFO and somehow... Yes, sir?
This is eerily like the Thomas Mantel incident.
I'm not familiar with that.
The one with the pilot went up to an extreme altitude after a flying saucer that was, a flying object was seen over Kentucky. And the dimensions were roughly the same.
Okay. I'm going to try to wrap this up here real quick. In spring of 2002, again, this is, I said this earlier, but I'll repeat it here real quickly. I located Dominic Citrullo in Florida. He said the material was confiscated by the government. His comments are important because he's the closest surviving relative of the Millers. In March of 2002, we located a new witness to the Norwood story. His name was Arthur Vieser, located by Donnie Blessing. great detective work in tracking this person down. He told us he was present on August 24th. He confirmed a lot of the Berger log because he's basically said, boom, the object was visible right when he turned on the light in the same place it was the night before. He went on camera with his comment. November of last year, a major development. A new photograph is found. A new photo of the Norwood object, which shows a very peculiar oddity here. If you'll see, the searchlight beam bends, and it's got a little spike in it. It's almost like the light's being sucked right toward the object. The photo was found in possession of a researcher, Ray Stanford of College Park, Maryland. The crook in the searchlight beam may represent some kind of a physics anomaly. We see examples of light bending in science and in photography. Analysis of this does suggest that this is not simply a case of a searchlight bouncing off a cloud nearby, causing the appearance of a bend.
Can I say something?
Yes.
We found that gravity can bend, the gravity wave could bend light.
Well, that's, like I say, we see this in photography and in science. We see that this can happen. It's plausible. But the theory is that it's such a massive object that somehow it's bending light right toward it. And as you can see, it's very strange. We're going to also show you some more pictures here in a minute. Breaking news here. October 2003, we've had a major development in Norwood. A officer with the 123rd Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron was located locally in Cincinnati. He was not familiar with the Norwood story. He told us that he received, back in '49, when the unit was headquartered at Lunkin Field in Cincinnati, they received a call from headquarters to check radar for a massive object over Norwood. They said they confirmed it on the radar, and they watched it for several months over Norwood. Like I say, I consider this a major development because it's a name, it's a unit, it gives us something to go on. The gentleman said that smaller objects were also seen on radar coming from the main object. The object finally departed by leaving the scene at a terrible speed, bolting straight out into space. If only Leonard Stringfield could have heard this testimony, he would have been very intrigued by this. The gentleman said that his entire unit was told to keep quiet about this and not discuss it with anyone. This puts a new focus now on the 123rd Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron. Okay, now here's what I was telling you about, some of the photos of the Norwood object we're going to analyze real quickly. There's a close-up of it. We did some filtering of the main image, some analysis of it. The surface has what seems to be things like cratering, ridges. It's not your typical flying saucer out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It looks more like some kind of a asteroid, for lack of a better word. It's very curious. Yes.
Can you go back to
I want to try it on this thing. That's
okay,
this.
I'll try with this. If you take a donut, if you take a layer of magnetic field around an object and keep on going around, sooner or later you have like a donut effect. A hole at the top and or at the bottom. The light could be hitting the one side and you're seeing the other side as a shadow. You're seeing a donut or the moisture. There you go.
Okay. I certainly don't have any answers, I'll tell you that. Just out of curiosity, I sent this to a few people by email. I sent one to Bill Jones here about the NASA's Cassini space probe took photographs of Saturn's moon, Phoebe, earlier this week. If anybody saw this on the news, just a little curiosity here, I put the two images side by side. I found a lot of striking similarity in the detail. You see the little outcroppings on each side are almost the very same point on both images. Of course, We're not suggesting anything, of course, because for that matter, the Death Star that Darth Vader drove around in looks a lot like another Saturn moon, Mimas. So anyway, the case data suggests that this is more than just a UFO sighting. I believe that this is indicates something that a government military operation was there in Norwood to evaluate and interact with the UFO. We do not have crucial evidence in this case. We have received testimony that the government has worked to silence the witnesses. Norwood is not a conspiracy theory. I call it a conspiracy facts, because I believe that a lot of our research and documentation can establish this. Working on the base... I'm sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Hey, if you checked on that unit's history...
Well, that's what I was just fixing to get into. Right here is what our focus right now is through freedom of information. What this gentleman has given us is names to go on. So we're tracking down that unit, the 123rd. I have launched a number of FOIA requests. A lot of those are pending. I've been stonewalled by a whole bunch of them so far. We have had recently some press, if anybody saw this in the newspaper. We're trying to make the last call for witnesses to this event. I don't believe witnesses are going to be around too much longer because it's a 55-year-old event. So if we're going to get any critical information, we're going to do it fast.
Was there any, in the newspaper, people send in letters to the editor? Was there anything in that section? Letters to the editor talk about it, or?
Kenny?
Yes.
Correlation, you may have already heard about Rick John Quiller's case. It was around 1989 in Lake Erie. The officer told the ice, they heard the ice cracking and that.
The East Lake case.
Smaller triangular shaped craft came. In 1984, I actually had a photograph of a part of the triangle. So you mentioned that triangle was coming out. I thought about that case.
Well, there's a lot. I've noticed there's a lot of stories about triangular objects coming from a larger object. I've read a lot of those.
This was back in 1989.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the most active MUFON website?
Well, we have the Ohio MUFON. There's actually, Bill, there is an international website too, is there?
Well, MUFON has their own website.
Yeah, MUFON.
And a number of states have their own website.
Right, and each state has their own website. So it depends. If you live in Ohio, then you want to go to the Ohio website, or Kentucky, go to Kentucky MUFON website.
Does the national one just have links to all the other ones? Or you just go to
Yeah, right. You can do that. If you go to the national one, you can have links to all of them. And yes,
Kenny?
Yes.
Any speculation why Norwood?
I like to think that at the time, you have to realize these searchlights are bright. This was a military-style searchlight they were using for advertising. The searchlights they use now are not half as bright as these were back then. And who knows? I'm just speculating. What if there was something out there, maybe a solid searchlight? I don't know. I really took those.
There's nothing going on at Wright Patterson?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know.
Do you know, Kenny, if this was the same searchlight as different cases? Probably was.
Probably was, I think.
Just one explanation, coming from that searchlight.
Well, thank you, everybody. That's my take on Norwood.
Let's give him a big round of applause.
Norwood is certainly a compelling UFO case and complicated to understand. I consider myself a skeptic, which means that I am critical of extraordinary claims. I review such accounts with sober objectivity. However, there are others who debunk UFO sightings with an agenda that is neither sober nor objective or scientific. Their efforts to dismiss is driven by a certain passion that is based on nothing more than pure ideology. It does not benefit this skeptical agenda to give the Norwood case a fair and measured assessment. If they did, there would be many unanswered questions that would demand account. What really happened at Norwood? Indeed, it is a challenging case to explore and try to explain. Much of the evidence is missing or, as reported, has been taken. People have been told to keep quiet, but the recent analysis of the Norwood photos has raised a number of interesting questions, and the whistleblowing remarks by the officer with the 123rd Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron suggest that something pretty big happened at Norwood in 1949. And these are dramatic implications behind this mystery surrounding the events in Norwood. Making this account a fascinating story is that it contains elements of intrigue and conspiracy. The implications of Norwood are nothing short of staggering.